Hey, fans, how's it going? This is Jeff, the guy from Reston. Um, Anyways, tonight's going to be an interesting night because we're going to talk about me. Because on this channel, I can talk about myself. So we're going to talk about me, Jeff, the guy from Reston. Anyways, what we're going to discuss, or what I'm going to tell you about me, is basically who I am as a person, where it all came from, and how I became the person who I am over time. Um, Anyways, let's start off in the beginning. And I'd have to say this, my character development, I guess, started from my very early ages, from grade school to middle school and to high school. And as I got older, I started realizing that certain concepts of government were, I happened to agree with, that nobody else agreed with. And that didn't make me obstinate or you know, this or that. But, I remember having a civics discussion in class, and all of a sudden I brought up the Second Amendment, and the teacher was like quick to put me down for it. And I said, yeah, but the Second Amendment, it's there for the protection of people to keep and bear arms, not to give them the right to keep and bear arms, if you look how it's worded. And, I even knew that back then. And so the thing is, from a very early age, I realized the importance of certain conservative values, that they have to be maintained in order to have a proper governed community and lifestyle. I mean, there's certain precepts that have to be maintained in order to have a family unit, in order, where you have a mother and a father, where to create the family unit, where you have stable communities, where the father can go out and work and earn a living, or the mother can go out and work and earn a living to provide for their comfort and needs, and for their children's comfort and needs when children come along. That's the whole idea of marriage in our culture. But the thing is, I started realizing these precepts or concepts back when I was in high school, when I was old enough, when I started focusing, when I realized what my self-worth was, and I started focusing on things that were beyond me. And this was from a guy who basically, my father was a Democrat, my mother was a Democrat. In fact, my mother still is a Democrat. She thinks, you know, that, because I voted for Trump, I voted for the devil reincarnated himself. Um, you know, but the thing is, what I'm trying to say is these certain precepts or concepts for a society have to be maintained. And if they're not maintained, society falls apart. And if you're looking at society today, society is falling apart. Look at how many people, because you say something they disagree with, they fly in a rage and attack you. You can't even have an honest conversation with somebody without somebody getting mad and upset. And because you basically poke fun of what their end all and get all being is all about. And you know, we had 8 years of that, and look at how bad the country was. I mean, there were going to people say the country was doing great, it was doing good. I don't think the country was doing that good when you had a ton of people out of work. You had a ton of people on public assistance. You had a ton of people, a hell of a lot more than there are now. Now you have over 157 million people working. I mean, this is what the country was at the beginning of the Reagan administration. About 157 million people were employed. The thing is the fact you have a country of 320 million people. If you really want a strong economy, we need to get that number up to almost 200 million people employed, working somewhere, making a decent wage, uh, earning a living, being able to do high quality work in production or service. Um, these are the things that are important. Um, Yes, I am a member of the MGTOW community, which means it's an acronym. MGTOW means men go their own way. Um, I have been that way for very good reason. And I've seen what women in the modern society offer a man today. And I guess you can call me old fashioned for this very reason. And that is, I don't want to take a bite of that apple. I don't need this new age of feminism where there's no responsibility, but all this, um, no responsibility for your behavior or actions, but basically a free ride to do whatever you want without the responsibility behind it. And don't get me wrong, you know, uh, that kind of behavior and lifestyle will catch up with you as a lady. And in MGTOW, we call it the wall. And the wall basically being when a woman hits about 30, that's when she starts going down. So from about the age of, well, if you get rid of the 18 as an adult thing and you go back, I'd say when a girl becomes about 16, at that point she's a woman. And from 16 to about 28 or 29 years old, that is her prime. From that age, she should be looking for somebody that's the best provider, somebody that she would really want to be with, who's a very good provider, and somebody who is able, that's going to be sticking around and taking care of her. And women have a track record of picking the worst guys for this. Why, I have no idea. But this is part of the problem. Women are picking the wrong types of men to settle down with and get married to, or settle down with, thinking that they can change them. Because as soon as they change this guy, then they cheat on him and they go and they find another bad boy to do the same thing with. And ladies, I'm going to tell you something. After a while, it doesn't work. You can't control a man no more than a man can control a woman. Okay, that's a fact of life. If a man wants to, if a man wants to control somebody, I mean, basically own a dog, own a cat, you know, have a have a have a bird that talks or something like that. There. You can control something, but you can't control another human being. It's impossible to do so. Don't try it. It won't work. And I think that sometimes people need to understand that um, the the whole idea is about control. Feminism is about not about equality for women today. It's about control over men. You know, look at if you look at all the laws in the workforce today, go to any department where that used to be dominated by men, and you'll see offices filled with nothing but women working there. And a lot of these women are single, a lot of them are married, a lot of them are this. But guarantee you one thing, uh men today are walking away from these women. It used to be these were places where men would go to meet a girl they liked after work, or something like that. They would ask for a drink, they would get together, and stuff like that. Maybe plan a nice weekend date or something like that, when they weren't working, and then presto bango, maybe a year or two later, he would tie the knot and get married to her, and then they would settle down, and she would give up working, and, you know, she would have 2 to 4 kids and live in a suburb somewhere in a house, depending on how well the man she married provided. The the thing is, now women are more educated now, which is, I'm not knocking the education thing. I think it's a great idea. But to turn around and use education to basically brainwash women into thinking that basically they're superior to men, when they're no more superior to men than a man is superior to a woman. We're different. We're wired differently. Men are wired differently than women are. Women are wired differently than men do. And people need to understand that. Certain things that a man says, and to me, it doesn't mean a thing. But you say the same thing to a woman, and it's like, oh, you just went over the wrong thing, or you said the wrong thing and got her so offended or so worked up, you know, that she is going to start doing something, uh, getting upset with you, or playing a passive aggressive role. Then, anyways, about me and what. So basically, very early on, I became a conservative after realizing certain precepts and concepts of government have to be there to work in order to have a society and a community. Okay. When I realized these things, and I think basically I didn't take a really hard look at it till after I got out of the Marine Corps, and I came home, and shortly thereafter, my grandfather died, and my grandmother gave me his rifle, and and that was my first gun that I ever owned, and so and then I started seeing some things on how the news media was portraying people who owned weapons, that they were dangerous, that they were this, that they were that, um, that that they were like public enemy number one. Um, you know, uh, I honestly don't think. I think most people that own weapons are pretty level-headed people. Are there? Don't get me wrong. Are there a few bad apples in the bunch? Are there people that do dumb things with firearms? Absolutely, absolutely. I'll give you a story. I'm not going to name any names, but I was one day I was out with a group of friends, and I was in my early 20s, and we went to this cabin out in the woods up in Gore, Virginia. Um, and there was a guy there, and he had a 22 caliber revolver with him, and they were doing some target practice out there, and so um, you know for shits and grins, he pointed the gun to his head and started clicking it, pulling the trigger, and he was trying to get a rise out of his girlfriend at the time. And I thought to myself, I said, so I told him, I said, Brian, I said, when you kill yourself, guess who's going to be messing around with your girlfriend? And after that, he stopped. So, you know, but if he had kept doing it and kept going on and playing with that pistol, I'm pretty sure he would have shot himself in his head eventually, just trying to play a game. Because that's how accidents like that do happen. You know, playing around with a gun is stupid. Doing stupid things with a gun is stupid. You know, it's a deadly weapon, and you've got to treat them as such. And if you don't want to treat them as such, then don't have one. That's as simple as that. The Constitution doesn't say you will buy a gun. The Constitution says you have the right to keep and bear arms, and the government won't infringe upon it. Not saying that, not saying these other things. But about conservatism and what I believe to be important to me, I think it's absolutely important to the country. And yes, the first talk radio that I listened to, that I, as an adult, listened to, was G. Gordon Liddy. And after listening to him for a good bit of time, then I switched over to Rush Limbaugh. And Rush Limbaugh had been doing it a lot longer than G. Gordon Liddy. G. Gordon Liddy worked on a local station, and then he went, national like Rush. But after a while, I think he just retired. Um, you know, the man was a true patriot, and he believed in a lot of things that most people today would people think that would be silly. But if you want to know, there are three things that I wholeheartedly believe in. The first one is God. I believe in God definitely there, because God was there before there was even me or a United States of America or anything like that. And if it hadn't been for God, there would not be a United States of America. The next is my country, because number one, that's the thing where I believe in my country, and the concepts that made up the Constitution were not racism, was not bigotry, or was not this, or that were the sins of slavery that were in our culture. The sins of slavery that came in our culture came from a long-standing rush of sin that goes back thousands and thousands of years, where men conquered other men and turned them into slaves. I mean, the Egyptians did it, the Romans did it, the Greeks did it, the the Arabs did it, the Persians did it. Um, every person, every peoples that I mentioned turned around and owned slaves. And it wasn't until 1861 to 1865 that a war was fought in this country to basically stop the influence of the Southern slave culture, and to end slavery, and to unite the country as a one nation again. And you know what, the South basically called Lincoln as a traitor because Lincoln was from Kentucky, but Lincoln morally opposed slavery. So, how can you basically turn around here and say that, you know, a lot of these issues that kids are talking about today, where they're hitting statues and stuff like that, knocking statues down of generals and things of that nature, hero people and stuff like that. Those people are long dead. The issues that you're discussing basically were already dealt with 150 years ago. That's why the 12th, 13th, and 14th Amendments were added to the Constitution after the Civil War. This country is a great country. Yes, when the Constitution was first written in this country, in order to be included in the Constitution, you had to be a white man and a landowner. So basically, you had to be a white man and a landowner for the Constitution to apply to you. Okay. Now, you were a free individual person if you didn't own land. But the Constitution also made reference to the Constitution, if you read it, makes reference to Indians as citizens, but they had to pay taxes. Red Indians as citizens, but they pay taxes to the government. So these are these things that are ongoing in life. And it may not be fair, it may not be right, but when the Constitution was first formed, our little republic came to life in 1788. And after the Constitution was written in 1787, it was ratified in Philadelphia in 1788. In 1791, the Bill of Rights were added to the Constitution because of the Anti-Federalists, because of the arguments of the Anti-Federalists. Like I said, if you get a chance, there's a book called American State Papers, and you need to read, because it'll contain the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution of the United States, and the Federalist Papers. Also, if you get your hands on the Anti-Federalist Papers, get your hands on the Anti-Federalist Papers, because they'll explain a lot why there was a Bill of Rights that is not mentioned in the Federalist Papers. Going from there to there and there. So anyways, folks, my story about me is the fact that I recognized some of these precepts and concepts as I got older. And when I started owning weapons, I realized how important it was that these concepts needed to be maintained, or the right to own property or weapons or anything else like that you couldn't do in any other country in the world except this one, this country here, the United States of America. Was this country here was the reason. And it was an experiment, and the experiment has lasted for 230 years. But then you have people who are trying to subvert the experiment, it's like a cancer inside of this country, because if the founders were alive today, they'd be like screaming of, why did we go to war in Vietnam? Why did we go to war in Korea after World War II? I mean, these were the things that they would be saying. And, for the people to be so heavily taxed as we're taxed today is wrong. The federal government was never supposed to operate on having that much money. The income tax was started to finance World War One, and it was supposed to be for the top 5% of people in the country. Um, Now basically they tax everybody from rich to poor, and the thing is, they have to, because number one, there's not enough money anywhere in the world to pay for the all the things that the government is providing for everybody. There's not enough money in the world for it to happen and work. And people need to understand this. There's not enough money in the world. And pretty soon we're going to get to a point where we're going to have so much outstanding debt that there's not going to be enough money in the world to cover the debt itself. And when that happens, economically, everything is going to collapse. The money will become worthless. The If you really want to know what's going to happen worldwide, is what happened to Germany in after the ending of the First World War. Um, um, After the end of the First World War, the government of the United States at the time enacted something called the Holly-Smoot Tariff Act. The idea was to keep gold in the country because they didn't want to ship it all out. So that's what the Holly-Smoot Tariff Act was all about, was to put tariffs on imported goods coming in. So everyone else reacted, and it shut down the economy worldwide. Germany, because they were primarily responsible for paying war reparations, basically got hit with so much debt that their citizens could no longer afford to pay the war reparations, and it bankrupted the entire country. Their 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 currency collapsed. I mean, it collapsed. I mean, it was like you could have uh, you could have uh, you could have 100 million marks sitting in a wheelbarrow, and that was the German money at the time, was called the German mark. You could have 100 million marks sitting in a wheelbarrow, and they'd leave the money alone, but they'd steal the wheelbarrow. That's how bad it was in Germany. I mean, you had to have a fortune to a small fortune to do anything, to buy anything. I mean, people were starving to death. This is what would happen to the world if the United States, because it is the biggest economy in the world, would all of a sudden falter. And just remember, for all you people out there that want to give everybody something on the courtesy dime of the taxpayers, just remember one thing. The taxpayers are the ones that go out there and earn a living. They go out there and they earn a living. They go out and pay for everything. And they are the people who basically keep this country moving forward. And it's the guy working at Starbucks, or it's the guy at Sheets, or at Rutter's, or your local doctor's office that you go to for this, or a mill house, or a coal processing plant, or a power plant. I mean, these are the things that keep America working, and people are paying money to have these services done. And when you basically turn around here and take extra money out from the government, from the people who are spending that money, they're not going out as much. They're not doing this as much. I mean, we had that for 8 years of Barack Obama, because Barack Obama forced a change in the healthcare system that forced people to buy health insurance. And if you didn't want to buy health insurance, you didn't have to. All you had to do was pay out of pocket. Like myself, I had a health insurance plan that was pretty much a catastrophic plan. Um, I paid to go to my doctor cash because it was cheaper. And then I would spend oh maybe $400 a year going to see my doctor, and about another 60 $70 on top of that to do lab work, and every time. So maybe about $180 every time I go visit the doctor. So 4 times a year, 180 times 4 will be about uh, 720 $720 a year. Now tell me something. How much does health insurance cost where you had to pay $720 in a year's time? Guarantee you most people will be paying 3, 4, or even 5 times that for your health insurance today. So, anyways, this is Jeff, the guy from Reston, signing off. Take care, and y'all have a great night. Bye bye.